The Hofburg Palace stands silent now, a grand monument whispering tales of emperors and empresses, of power and tragedy. For centuries, this sprawling complex in Vienna held the heart of an empire, a stage for opulence, intrigue, and heart-breaking secrets. Beyond the glittering chandeliers and velvet drapes, behind the closed doors of its thousands of rooms, lie stories that defy belief, lives lived under an unimaginable spotlight. You think you know history? You are about to discover what truly stirred beneath the imperial facade. Prepare to uncover shocking truths, forgotten whispers, and the deeply personal dramas that shaped an entire continent. Number 1. The Empress's Final Journey. A fate unforeseen. The afternoon sun of September 10, 1898, shimmered over Lake Geneva, casting a deceptive calm upon the city of Geneva, Switzerland. Empress Elizabeth of Austria, known universally as Sisi, a woman who had spent decades trying to escape the rigid confines of her imperial life, was enjoying one of her rare moments of freedom. She was nearing her 61st birthday, a milestone that seemed to weigh heavily on her restless spirit. Her famed beauty, meticulously maintained through obsessive diets and strenuous exercise, was still remarkable, though she now mostly concealed it behind veils, parasols, and fans, refusing to let cameras capture the passage of time on her face. On this particular day, Sisi was staying at the Hotel Beau Rivage, a luxurious establishment overlooking the serene lake. She was traveling incognito, or at least as incognito as an empress could ever be, using the alias Countess von Hohenheim's. Her small retinue included her lady-in-waiting, Countess Irma Sterre, a woman whose loyalty and discretion were unwavering. Sisi had spent her morning in her usual energetic fashion, walking for hours, a habit she maintained rigorously to control her weight and soothe her nervous temperament. She had profound aversion to inactivity, believing movement was the only true cure for her pervasive melancholy. The world of court, with its endless ceremonies and stifling etiquette, had always felt like a cage to her, and these solitary wanderings were her only escape. The Empress had planned to board a pedal steamer, the Geneva, which would take her across the lake to Montreux. It was a simple journey, one she had made before, offering her the anonymity and fresh air she craved. She valued her privacy above all else, often dismissing her guards and moving about with minimal protection, a decision that had caused considerable concern among her staff and the Austrian government. Yet Sisi stubbornly held to her desire for personal freedom even in the face of warnings. She had always believed that fate would find her wherever she was, regardless of precautions. As the time for the steamer's departure approached, Sisi and Countess Sestere left the hotel. The street, Rue des Aubes, was bustling with typical afternoon activity. Pedestrians moved along the pavement, carriages clattered by, and the air was filled with the murmur of conversations and the distant cries of gulls. Sisi, dressed in a simple black dress, her face partly obscured by a dark veil, walked briskly, her famous slender figure moving with a distinct grace. Countess Sestere walked beside her, carrying a small parasol. What neither of them knew, what no one could have predicted, was that a shadow had been following them, a malevolent presence lurking in the unsuspecting crowd. Luigi Liceni, a 25-year-old Italian anarchist, had arrived in Geneva with a singular, chilling purpose: to make a statement, to strike a blow against the aristocracy, against the very idea of monarchy. He had initially intended to assassinate Prince Philippe, Duke of Orleans, but the Duke had unexpectedly departed Geneva. Disappointed but undeterred, Liceni, upon reading a newspaper report, learned that the Empress of Austria was in the city. To him, Sisi represented everything he despised: wealth, privilege, and the symbol of a system he wished to dismantle. Her identity, hidden as it was, became irrelevant once revealed. As Sisi and Countess Sestere approached the lakefront, hurrying to catch the steamer, before it pulled away from the pier, Liceni stepped out from the crowd. He moved swiftly directly towards the Empress. His hand concealed until the last moment, held a sharpened stiletto, a narrow, vicious weapon with a needle-like point. Before anyone could react, before the Empress or her companion could even register his presence, Duchenne lunged. The blow was quick, precise, and shockingly understated. Duchenne struck Sisi in the chest with the stiletto. The force was not immense, but the weapon was designed for penetration. It was so swift, so devoid of theatricality, that the Empress did not even cry out. She merely staggered, a slight gasp escaping her lips. Countess Sisi, seeing the sudden movement, instinctively reached out to steady her. "What was that?" Sisi murmured, her hand going to her chest, not yet realizing the gravity of the situation. The stiletto had entered just above her heart, but the tight lacing of her corset, a garment she wore religiously, had momentarily constricted the wound, preventing immediate outward bleeding. It was a cruel irony, her lifelong dedication to her figure T. Duchenne, having delivered the blow, immediately fled, disappearing into the chaotic anonymity of the street. The scene remained deceptively calm for a few moments, the casual observers nearby largely unaware of what had just transpired. Sisi, still seemingly more annoyed than injured, insisted on continuing to the steamer. She believed she had merely been punched by a ruffian. Her primary concern was to board the boat, to maintain her schedule and her illusion of normalcy. With Countess Sisi's assistance, Sisi managed to walk the remaining few yards to the gangplank. She even ascended it, a testament to her extraordinary fortitude and the delayed effects of the injury. However, once on the deck of the Geneva, her strength began to fail. Her body, having held on for a few crucial moments, started to succumb to the internal damage. As she reached the middle of the deck, she swayed, her legs giving way. She collapsed onto the wooden planks, groaning faintly. Countess Sisi, her heart pounding with growing alarm, quickly knelt beside her mistress. She noticed a small dark stain spreading on Sisi's white blouse just above the heart. It was then that the horrifying truth began to dawn upon her. The initial shock had worn off, and the wound, previously held tight by the corset, was now bleeding more freely as Sisi's muscles relaxed. The captain of the Geneva, seeing the commotion, rushed over. They immediately recognized the Empress, despite her attempts at disguise. Panic began to spread among the few passengers who had witnessed the collapse. Sisi's breathing became shallow and ragged. With quick thinking, the captain ordered the steamer to return to the pier, immediately abandoning its planned voyage. Gentle hands lifted the Empress, carrying her back to the Hotel Beau Rivage. She was laid upon her bed, her breathing growing fainter with each passing minute. Countess Sisi, frantic with fear, tore open Sisi's clothing to examine the wound. The small, almost imperceptible puncture mark was now clear, a tiny opening that had unleashed a torrent of devastation within. Doctors were summoned, but it was clear to everyone present that there was little, perhaps nothing they could do. The stiletto had pierced her aorta, the main artery carrying blood from the heart. Empress Elizabeth of Austria, Queen of Hungary, the woman who had captivated the continent with her beauty and her elusive charm, who had spent a lifetime escaping the very power she embodied, died in her hotel room at around 2:40 p.m. Her last breath was taken far from the glittering halls of the Hofburg, in a quiet room overlooking a lake she loved. The news rippled through Geneva with disbelieving speed, then across Europe, shattering the tranquility of the late 19th century. Her death was not a grand dramatic end on a battlefield or a royal bed. It was a sudden, brutally efficient act of violence on a public street, a stark and unexpected conclusion to a life lived constantly on the edge of profound sadness and relentless seeking of freedom. The empire mourned, the world reeled, and the Hofburg Palace, her former golden cage, stood in stunned silence, reflecting the unimaginable loss of its most complex and enigmatic empress. The event was not just a personal tragedy. It was a chilling harbinger of the political turbulence that would soon engulf Europe, an early tremor of the seismic shifts to come. Number 2. The heart of the empire. A palace's living pulse. The Hofburg Palace was not simply a building. It was a living, breathing city. Within a city, a colossal engine of power and privilege, that throbbed with continuous, unseen activity. For centuries, it housed not just the imperial family but an entire society dedicated to their service, a hidden world of immense complexity and ceaseless motion. When one walked through the grand staterooms or gazed at the opulent furnishings, it was easy to forget the sheer logistical miracle that made such a life possible. The scale was staggering. The Hofburg contained somewhere around 2,600 rooms, an unimaginable labyrinth of chambers, halls, offices, and private apartments. These rooms were not merely decorative. Each served a purpose, from the emperor's private studies to the empress's dressing rooms, from vast ballrooms to modest servants' quarters tucked away in distant wings. To maintain this colossal structure, to heat it, light it, clean it, and feed its inhabitants, required an army of people whose work began before dawn and often stretched late into the night. Think of the daily needs. Thousands of meals were prepared every single day, not just for the imperial family and their immediate court, but for the hundreds of officials, military officers, guests, and servants who resided within the palace walls. The kitchens were a city unto themselves, a series of vast cavernous spaces located primarily in the Schweizerhof section and other service wings. Here fires burned constantly in immense stoves. Copper pots gleamed, and the air was thick with the aromas of roasting meats, simmering sauces, and freshly baked breads. Teams of master chefs, sous chefs, bakers, pastry chefs, and scullery maids worked in synchronized chaos. Fresh produce arrived daily from imperial farms and local markets. Barrels of wine were rolled in from the cellars, and exotic ingredients from tropical fruits to rare spices were sourced from across the empire and beyond. The logistics of ensuring every dish was prepared to perfection, served at the correct temperature, and delivered to the correct table at the precise moment, required military precision. Food for the imperial family was taste-tested multiple times before it reached their table, a precaution against poisoning, a stark reminder of the ever-present undercurrent of danger in such high-stakes environments. Beyond food, there was the constant demand for fresh laundry. Imagine the sheer volume of linens, tablecloths, napkins, bedsheets, towels, and the intricate costumes worn by the imperial family and their attendants. The laundry facilities at the Hofburg were enormous. A perpetual cycle of washing, drying, starching, and ironing. Women worked tirelessly over steaming tubs and hot irons, ensuring every piece was pristine. The laundry rooms hummed with the rhythmic thud of washboards and the hiss of steam, a stark contrast to the quiet elegance of the imperial apartments above. Then there was the heating. Vienna's winters are famously cold, and keeping thousands of rooms warm in an era before central heating was an immense undertaking. Firewood and coal arrived in endless carts, transported through hidden tunnels and service entrances to numerous stokeholds located throughout the palace. Hundreds of fireplaces needed to be lit, maintained, and cleaned daily. Servants, often young men and boys, carried heavy scuttles of coal and baskets of wood up and down countless staircases, their faces smudged with soot, their hands calloused from the labor. The faint smell of wood smoke was a constant companion in the older sections of the palace. Lighting was another monumental task. Before electricity, every single room, every hallway, every public space relied on candles, oil lamps, or gaslight. Hundreds of candles were lit each evening, their wicks trimmed, their holders cleaned. Imagine the sheer number of candelabra in the grand ballrooms, each requiring individual attention. Footmen and chambermaids spent hours preparing and maintaining these light sources, ensuring the palace glittered for evening receptions and remained safely lit through the night. The risk of fire was ever present, requiring constant vigilance. The cleaning staff was equally vast. Every surface from marble floors to gilded cornices needed to be polished, dusted, and swept. Carpets were beaten, windows washed, and furniture buffed to a high sheen. The famous Schönbrunn yellow walls, a signature of Habsburg palaces, required constant touch-ups. The delicate fabrics of the upholstery, the intricate tapestries, and the priceless artworks demanded specialized care. It was a never-ending battle against dust and the wear of time, carried out largely unseen, often in the very early hours of the morning or late at night, so as not to disturb the imperial family or their guests. Beyond these fundamental services, there was a vast bureaucracy. The Hofburg was the seat of government housing ministries, administrative offices, and the Emperor's Privy Council. Secretaries, clerks, archivists, and messengers moved through its corridors, carrying documents, conducting meetings, and managing the affairs of a vast, multi-ethnic empire. The imperial court was its own complex organism, with masters of ceremonies, key-queries, ladies-in-waiting chamberlains, and countless minor officials, each with a specific role in maintaining the elaborate etiquette. The hidden passages and back staircases that crisscrossed the palace were vital to this operation. While the imperial family moved through grand public halls, the servants and staff used a parallel network of unseen routes, ensuring they could perform their duties efficiently and discreetly. Meals were transported via service lifts, laundry carried through concealed corridors, and messages hand-delivered through a labyrinth of lesser-known doorways. These hidden pathways allowed the illusion of seamless royal life to be maintained, ensuring that the gears of the imperial machine turned silently beneath the gilded surface. The sheer volume of human endeavor required to keep the Hofburg functioning was immense. Each person, from the lowliest kitchen hand to the most esteemed courtier, played a part in this elaborate ballet of service. Their lives, largely unrecorded in the grand histories of the empire, were intertwined with the palace's existence, a testament to the colossal effort that lay beneath the glittering facade of imperial power. The Hofburg was not just a home for its rulers, it was a universe unto itself, sustained by the tireless, often invisible efforts of thousands of dedicated individuals. Number 3. The Empress's hidden apartments. Empress Elizabeth Sisi was a woman perpetually yearning for privacy. A stark contrast to her public role as one of Europe's most photographed and idealized monarchs. Within the vast expanse of the Hofburg Palace, a place designed for display and ceremony, Sisi sought to carve out her own private sanctuaries, spaces that reflected her artistic temperament and her deep-seated desire to escape the suffocating demands of court life. These hidden apartments offered a glimpse into her inner world, a world far removed from the stiff formality of Franz Joseph's imperial routine. Her most significant private refuge within the Hofburg was located in the Amalienburg wing, a part of the palace that allowed for a degree of separation from the main state apartments. Here, Sisi fashioned rooms that were distinctly her own, decorated not for public consumption or political receptions, but for her personal comfort, her intellectual pursuits, and her relentless. Unlike the more traditional, heavily gilded and often masculine-leaning decor favored by Franz Joseph Sisi's rooms were lighter, more ethereal, and filled with personal touches that spoke volumes. Abhor. One of the most revealing of these spaces was her dressing room, or toilette, as it was known then. This was not merely a place for donning clothes. It was a temple to her beauty, a critical component of her identity. The room was equipped with a sophisticated system of mirrors, allowing her to view her figure from every angle, an obsession that bordered on the compulsive. Scales were prominently displayed, and her weight was recorded meticulously every day, a ritual that dictated her mood. Her dressing room contained specialized equipment for her hair care, including a unique method of heating curling irons and brushes. Her hair, famously reaching her ankles, required hours of attention daily, a task performed by her dedicated hairdresser, Fanny Angerer, who was more a confidant than a mere employee. This room was a private stage where the performance of Sisi the Beauty was rehearsed, a constant battle against the natural processes of aging and the demands of public image. Adjacent to her dressing room was her private gymnasium, a truly revolutionary concept for a royal lady of her era. Sisi believed passionately in physical exertion as a means of controlling her anxieties and maintaining her famous figure. This room was equipped with various exercise apparatuses, including a set of gymnastic rings hanging from the ceiling, a horizontal bar, and weights. She would spend hours here, often in secret, performing strenuous exercises that would be considered intense, even by modern standards. She lifted weights, did pull-ups, and engaged in acrobatic movements, all while wearing special lightweight clothing. This personal gym was a testament to her iron will and her determination to forge her own path, even if it meant defying the conventions of royal femininity. It was a space where she could shed the layers of imperial expectation and simply be a body in motion, free from scrutiny. Her private study and salon were also deeply personal. Unlike the formal reception rooms, these spaces were filled with books, paintings, and personal mementos that reflected her intellectual curiosity and her melancholic nature. Sisi was an avid reader, particularly of poetry, and she even composed her own verses, often expressing her deep dissatisfaction with court life and her yearning for freedom. Her library contained works by Heinrich Heine, her favorite poet, alongside volumes of Greek classics and philosophical texts. These rooms were not for meeting ministers or entertaining dignitaries. They were places of quiet contemplation where Sisi could retreat from the relentless public gaze. She would often spend hours here, either reading, writing, or simply gazing out of the windows, lost in her thoughts. The decor of these hidden apartments was often simpler, with a focus on comfort and a more intimate scale. While the public rooms of the Hofburg were grand and imposing, Sisi's private spaces often featured lighter furniture, delicate fabrics, and a preference for white and pale colors. A stark contrast to the heavy reds and golds elsewhere. She incorporated elements of the natural world she so loved, perhaps a small indoor garden or flowers from her favorite imperial gardens at Schönbrunn, attempting to bring a sense of the outdoors into her enclosed world. Access to these rooms was strictly controlled. Only her closest ladies in waiting, her hairdresser, and a few trusted servants were permitted entry without express permission. Even Emperor Franz Joseph rarely entered these private havens without an invitation, respecting his wife's fierce need for personal space. This level of privacy was unusual for a monarch of the time, highlighting Sisi's unique and often defiant personality. She was not content to live a life entirely dictated by protocol. She actively sought to carve out niches where she could truly be herself, away from the prying eyes of the court and the public. These hidden apartments were more than just rooms. They were a psychological escape hatch. They represented Sisi's ongoing struggle against the gilded cage of her imperial existence. Within these walls, she could be the poet, the athlete, the melancholic thinker, rather than simply the empress. They were spaces where her true, complex self could breathe, even if only for a few precious hours each day. The fact that these intensely private spaces existed within the very heart of the Hofburg, a place of such immense public presence, speaks volumes about Sisi's relentless pursuit of personal liberty and her profound need for a world that was truly secretly her own. Number 4. The Meerling Cover-Up. A Prince's Tragic End. The morning of January 30th, 1889 began with a chilling discovery that would send shockwaves across Europe and forever cast a pall over the Habsburg dynasty. At the Imperial Hunting Lodge in Meerling, a secluded estate southwest of Vienna, the only son and heir of Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elizabeth and his 17-year-old mistress, Baroness Mary Vetsera, were found in his private bedroom. The official explanation swiftly issued was that Rudolf had died of heart failure. However, the true story, shrouded in a desperate and elaborate cover-up orchestrated by the highest echelons of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was far more shocking and tragic. Rudolf, at 30 years old, was a man consumed by internal turmoil. Intelligent and liberal-minded, he held progressive views that often clashed with his father's rigid conservatism. He was a keen ornithologist, a prolific writer under pseudonyms, and a vocal proponent of reform, yet he also suffered from profound personal unhappiness. Exacerbated by an unhappy marriage to Princess Stephanie of Belgium and a life of constant expectation and scrutiny, he was increasingly prone to bouts of depression, relied heavily on morphine to alleviate chronic pain and anxiety, and struggled with a sense of purposelessness within the confines of his predetermined imperial destiny. Mary Vetsera, a vibrant and impetuous young noblewoman, was utterly infatuated with the crown prince. Their affair had blossomed quickly, marked by an intense, passionate, and ultimately desperate connection. She saw in Rudolf a romantic, tragic figure, and he found in her a passionate devotion that was missing from his public life. Their relationship, however, was strictly forbidden and highly dangerous, threatening the stability of the imperial family and the very succession. On January 29th, Rudolf and Mary traveled separately to Merling. Mary, disguised as a boy, was smuggled into the hunting lodge with the help of Rudolf's personal coachman. That evening, Rudolf hosted a small dinner, though Mary remained hidden in his rooms. His hunting companions noticed his unusual quietness and preoccupation. The next morning, when Rudolf failed to appear for breakfast, his valet Loschek grew concerned. He tried to enter Rudolf's bedroom but found the door locked from the inside. After repeated unanswered knocks, Loschek became alarmed. He called Count Josef Hoyos, one of Rudolf's hunting companions, for assistance. Together, they forced open the bedroom door. What they discovered inside was horrific. Rudolf was lying on his bed, a single gunshot wound to his temple. Beside him on the floor was Mary Vetsera, also dead, seemingly from a gunshot wound. The scene immediately spoke of a murder-suicide pact. The first person to be informed was Emperor Franz Joseph, Rudolf's father. The news was delivered by Count Hoyos, who rushed back to the Hofburg in Vienna. The impact on the emperor was devastating. Rudolf was his only son, the heir, the future of the dynasty. The truth of the situation, a double suicide involving the crown prince and his mistress, was utterly unthinkable for the conservative and deeply religious court. It would be a catastrophic scandal, shaking the foundations of the monarchy and inviting international opprobrium. A swift and ruthless cover-up was immediately put into motion. The initial message to the public was that Rudolf had died of a heart attack. This lie, however, was fragile and quickly began to unravel as whispers circulated. The sheer speed and coordination of the cover-up demonstrated the immense power and control wielded by the imperial family and their advisors. The body of Mary Vetsera presented an immediate problem. Her presence at Merling, let alone her death there, could not be acknowledged. Her family, particularly her mother Helene, was summoned and coerced into complicity. Mary's body was hastily dressed, propped up between two relatives in a carriage, and spirited away from Merling in the dead of night. They were instructed to make it appear as if she were still alive, with her head supported to prevent it from falling forward. Her hands were reportedly tied to prevent them from slipping. She was then buried in a shallow, unmarked grave in the nearby Heiligenkreuz Abbey cemetery, with no official ceremony, in secret. Her family was forced to swear an oath of silence, threatening severe consequences if they ever revealed the truth. Meanwhile, at Merling, frantic efforts were made to clean the scene, remove any incriminating evidence, and rearrange the bodies to fit the heart attack narrative, at least superficially. Rudolf's body was quickly brought back to Vienna. The emperor ordered that a formal medical report be fabricated, stating a natural death. However, due to the visible bullet wound, this was impossible to sustain even internally. A new, equally fabricated story was then concocted. Rudolf had suffered a fit of madness and shot Mary before taking his own life. This allowed for a church burial, albeit one with limitations, as suicide victims were traditionally denied Christian burial rites. Empress Elizabeth was deeply affected by her son's death. She knew the truth, having received an early unfiltered account. Her grief was profound, and it only deepened her already pervasive melancholy. She found solace only in her continued wanderings, and her fervent desire for freedom from court life. For Franz Joseph, the loss of his heir was a personal and dynastic catastrophe. He never fully recovered from the blow, becoming even more rigid and isolated. The Merling incident created a deep and lasting wound in the heart of the Habsburg monarchy, a tragedy that foreshadowed the greater cataclysms to come. The full details of the Meerling tragedy remained officially suppressed for decades. Though rumors and alternative theories persisted throughout Europe, it was only much later, with the eventual release of personal letters and official documents, that the true harrowing sequence of events became clear. A desperate love, a broken prince, and a powerful empire's desperate attempt to hide an unbearable truth. The Meerling hunting lodge, once a place of imperial leisure, became forever synonymous with this dark and devastating secret, a silent testament to the lengths the Habsburgs would go to protect their image, even at the cost of the truth about their own flesh and blood. Number 5. The Forbidden Library of the Hofburg. Within the vast labyrinthine corridors of the Hofburg Palace, amidst the numerous state libraries and formal archives, there existed a collection of books and papers that were not meant for public consumption, nor for the casual glance of courtiers. This was not a forbidden library in the sense of holding dangerous political tracts or revolutionary manifestos. Instead, it was a deeply personal, intensely private collection belonging to Empress Elizabeth, a repository of her soul's journey, her rebellious thoughts, and her poetic confessions. It was forbidden only in the sense that it was guarded by her fierce need for privacy and her aversion to scrutiny. Sisi was an intensely intellectual and introspective woman, far more so than her public image as a beautiful fashion icon suggested. While her husband, Emperor Franz Joseph, immersed himself in state documents and military reports, Sisi found solace and intellectual stimulation in literature, philosophy, and particularly her private library within her Hofburg apartments was a carefully corporated reflection of her inner world, a sanctuary where she could escape the relentless demands of imperial duty and the superficiality of court life. The collection was dominated by the works of Heinrich Heine, the German Romantic poet whom Sisi idolized. She found in his melancholic, often cynical and deeply emotional verses a kindred spirit. She not only read his works voraciously, but also translated them, a testament to her linguistic prowess and her deep engagement with his words. Her admiration for Heine was so profound that she called herself a disciple, and would even summon his spirit in seances, a practice that further underscored her unconventional nature and her yearning for a connection beyond the tangible world. Her private library held multiple editions of his collected works, many of them heavily annotated with her own comments and reflections, revealing her inner thoughts and frustrations. Beyond Heine, her library contained a wide array of classical literature, philosophical texts, and historical accounts. Sisi was particularly drawn to Greek mythology and history, finding inspiration in its narratives of fate, tragedy, and beauty. She studied ancient Greek with a private tutor, surprising many with her dedication and proficiency. Her rooms likely held texts by Homer, Plato, and other classical authors, perhaps in their original languages. These books were not merely decorative. They were genuinely read, absorbed, and pondered upon, providing Sisi with an intellectual escape from the political machinations and social obligations that she found so suffocating. What made this library forbidden was its intensely personal nature. It contained not just the works of others, but also Sisi's own voluminous collection of poems. From her youth, Sisi had secretly written poetry, often under pseudonyms. These verses were deeply revealing, expressing her profound unhappiness with her life as empress, her feelings of being caged, her longing for freedom, her melancholic reflections on beauty, aging, and death, and her often critical views of the Habsburg court and its rigid protocols. She called her poems her Nordseelieder, songs of the North Sea, reflecting her longing for the wildness and freedom of the ocean, a stark contrast to the landlocked imperial city. These poems were never intended for public consumption during her lifetime. Sisi had a strict instruction that her personal writings, especially her poetry, were to be destroyed upon her death. However, her loyal lady-in-waiting, Ida Ferenczi, who was often privy to Sisi's most intimate thoughts and served as her literary confidant, secretly preserved them. Ferenczi understood the historical and personal significance of these works, recognizing them as the true voice of the elusive empress. It was through Ferenci's careful preservation that these forbidden verses eventually saw the light of day decades after Sisi's death. The presence of this private, almost clandestine library within the Hofburg underscored Sisi's intellectual rebellion against her predetermined role. While Franz Joseph's library was a place of state papers and official records, Sisi's was a haven for her soul, a place where she could indulge her passions, articulate her frustrations, and explore the depths of her unconventional mind. The books were not just objects, they were companions, windows to other worlds, and silent witnesses to her profound inner struggles. This hidden collection of words, both read and written, served as a powerful counterpoint to the glittering public life of the Empress. It revealed a woman who was constantly seeking meaning beyond the superficial, a deep thinker trapped in a role that demanded outward grace but stifled inner expression. The forbidden nature of this library was less about official prohibition and more about Sisi's desperate need to protect her inner world from the relentless gaze of the empire. She embodied. It was a silent testament to her enduring spirit of defiance and her yearning for an intellectual and emotional freedom she rarely found in her imperial life. Number 6. Whispers in the Wall. The court's hidden politics. The Hofburg Palace for centuries was not just the residence of the Habsburg emperors and their families. It was the nerve center of an immense, multi-ethnic empire. Beneath the glittering surface of imperial balls, state banquets, and formal ceremonies, a complex and often ruthless game of hidden politics was constantly played out. The walls of the Hofburg held countless whispers of ambition, betrayal, alliances, and subtle power struggles that shaped the destiny of Austria, Hungary, and by extension much of Europe. The imperial court was a vast ecosystem, teeming with ministers, ambassadors, generals, privy councillors, ladies-in-waiting chamberlains, and a host of minor officials. Each had their own interests, their own factions, and their own patrons. Access to the emperor was the ultimate currency, and gaining his ear even for a fleeting moment could make or break careers, shift policies, and determine the fate of provinces. Those closest to the emperor, like his personal advisors or certain members of his court, wielded immense influence, often more than official titles might suggest. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir apparent after Rudolf's death, maintained his own court and network within the Hofburg, frequently clashing with Emperor Franz Joseph and his established minister. His progressive views and his morganatic marriage to Countess Sophie Chotek, a decision that deeply displeased the emperor, created constant friction and a separate power base. Within the palace walls, the whispers surrounding their strained relationship, the emperor's refusal to acknowledge Sophie's status, and Franz Ferdinand's growing impatience for power, were constant undercurrents in court life. Espionage was not just a tool of international relations, it was an integral part of court life. Information was power, and individuals vied to be the first to deliver vital news. Whether it was political intelligence from abroad or a scandalous rumor about a rival, servants, though seemingly invisible, were often keen observers, and their loyalty could be bought or swayed. Letters were routinely opened and read, conversations discreetly overheard, and alliances formed and broken behind closed doors. The court was a hotbed of intrigue, where a misspoken word or an ill-judged glance could have significant repercussions. The intricate web of noble families also played a crucial role. Dynastic marriages were not just romantic unions. They were strategic alliances designed to consolidate power and influence. Families like the Schwarzenbergs, the Esterházys, and the Liechtensteins held enormous sway, often placing their members in key positions within the government and the military. These families engaged in subtle rivalries, competing for imperial favor, land, and prestige. Their drawing rooms and private dinners within the Hofburg or their Viennese palaces were often the true battlegrounds where political deals were struck and careers were either launched or subtly undermined. Empress Elizabeth, despite her aversion to politics, often found herself embroiled in these hidden currents. Her deep personal connection with Hungary, her efforts to promote the Hungarian language and culture, and her instrumental role in the Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867 created a distinct pro-Hungarian faction around her. This often put her at odds with the more traditional Austrian elements of the court, leading to internal tensions and subtle maneuvering. Her ladies-in-waiting, her Hungarian companions, and her personal physician were not just attendants. They were part of her network, providing her with information and relaying her subtle influences. The daily rituals of the court, seemingly purely ceremonial, were often loaded with political meaning. Who stood closest to the emperor during a reception? Who was invited to a private dinner? Whose carriage was parked prominently in the inner courtyard? These seemingly trivial details were meticulously observed and analyzed, signaling shifts in favor, rising stars, or those who had fallen from grace. A slight nod, a prolonged glance, or a casual remark from the emperor could send ripples through the entire court, changing fortunes overnight. The military, a powerful force within the empire, also maintained its own complex hierarchies and rivalries within the Hofburg. Generals competed for command, for resources, and for the emperor's trust. The Imperial War Ministry, located within the palace complex, was a hive of activity where strategic decisions were made and alliances were forged or broken, often through veiled threats and subtle pressures. The influence of Archduke Albrecht, a formidable military figure and uncle to the emperor, was legendary, and his opinions carried immense weight, often shaping military policy regardless of other consideration. The Hofburg's very architecture facilitated these hidden games. Its endless corridors, numerous antechambers, and secluded courtyards provided ample opportunities for discreet conversations, secret meetings, and the exchange of confidential information. Messages were passed through servants, coded notes were exchanged, and loyalties were tested constantly. The palace was a stage for grandeur, but behind the scenes, it was a finely tuned machine of power constantly in motion, driven by the ambitions and hidden agendas of those who walked its hallowed halls. These whispers in the walls, though often unheard by the outside world, were the true pulse of the empire, dictating its direction and ultimately its fate. Number 7. The Royal Menageries' Forgotten Beasts. While the most famous imperial menagerie, the Tiergarten Schönbrunn, was located at the Schönbrunn Palace, the Hofburg itself was not entirely devoid of its own fascinating and sometimes bizarre connection to the animal kingdom. Throughout its long history, particularly in earlier centuries, the line between imperial residence and private zoological collection was blurrier. The Hofburg, as the central seat of power and a symbol of Habsburg, might occasionally house exotic creatures brought as gifts from distant lands or acquired as symbols of global reach. These forgotten beasts represent a less talked about aspect of court life, where the wonders of the natural world, often far removed from their native habitats, became part of the imperial spectacle. In the medieval and early modern periods, it was common for European monarchs to maintain small, private collections of exotic animals within or adjacent to their palaces. These living curiosities served multiple purposes. They were symbols of wealth and power, demonstrating the monarch's ability to acquire rare and expensive items from across the globe. They were sources of entertainment and fascination for the court, and sometimes they were objects of scientific curiosity, though often observed without genuine understanding of their needs. While detailed records of a large-scale menagerie within the Hofburg itself are sparse compared to Schönbrunn, historical accounts and court records reveal the presence of individual remarkable animals that resided within the palace complex or were directly associated with it. For example, during the reign of Emperor Maximilian I, in the late 15th and early 16th centuries who had a strong interest in natural history. There were documented instances of exotic birds and even larger animals being kept in designated areas of imperial residences. These might have included large birds of prey for falconry, or peacocks displaying their plumage in inner courtyards for aesthetic pleasure. Later, as trade routes expanded and the Habsburg Empire grew, more unusual animals found their way to Vienna. Accounts exist of rare birds from the Americas, often colorful parrots and macaws, being kept in gilded cages within the Hofburg's more private courtyards, or even within the imperial apartments themselves. These birds were not just decorative. Their ability to mimic human speech made them fascinating companions for bored royals and a source of amusement for courtiers. Imagine the vibrant squawk of a macaw echoing through a Hofburg courtyard. A startling contrast to the solemn imperial rituals. One of the most intriguing, though perhaps less permanent, animal presences at the Hofburg was related to the imperial visits of foreign dignitaries. Gifts from distant lands often included animals. During the 17th and 18th centuries, it was not uncommon for an envoy from the Ottoman Empire or other far-flung regions to arrive in Vienna with a retinue that included camels or even elephants. While these grand beasts would not have been permanent residents of the inner Hofburg, they certainly would have made a spectacular entrance into the imperial city, often paraded through the very gates of the palace, temporarily becoming part of the Hofburg's grand spectacle. Accounts describe the amazement and awe of the Viennese populace at the sight of such creatures, making these arrivals significant public events. The imperial stables, a massive complex within the Hofburg grounds, were home to thousands of horses, primarily the famed Lipizaners of the Spanish riding school. While not exotic in the same sense as a parrot or a camel, these magnificent horses were treated with utmost reverence. Living lives of luxury and meticulous care, trained in classical dressage that elevated them beyond mere working animals to living works of art. Their presence, their daily exercise routines in the winter riding school, and their meticulously kept stalls were an integral part of the Hofburg's living pulse. The relationship between the Habsburgs and their horses was profound, representing centuries of tradition, equestrian excellence, and a deep appreciation for these noble animals. There were also inevitably the unofficial animals, the countless palace dogs and cats, many of them favored pets of the imperial family members. Empress Elizabeth, despite her distant public persona, was known to have a fondness for dogs, particularly her Irish wolfhounds and Scottish terriers. These canine companions would have had privileged access to her private apartments, their quiet presence offering her comfort and unwavering loyalty, a contrast to the demanding human relationships of court. Their soft paws would have pattered on the polished floors, their barks occasionally disrupting the solemn silence of a corridor. The existence of these forgotten beasts, whether the occasional exotic visitor, the constant presence of revered horses, or the quiet companionship of pets, offers a more intimate and unexpected dimension to the Hofburg Palace. They remind us that even within the most rigid and formal of environments, there were moments of wildness, of natural beauty, and of personal connection that transcended the strictures of imperial life. These animals, in their own silent ways, were witnesses to history, sharing the grand stage of the Hofburg, adding another layer to the complex tapestry of life within the heart of the empire. Number 8. The Emperor's Lonely Supper. Emperor Franz Joseph I, the formidable and long-reigning monarch of Austria, Hungary, lived a life defined by unwavering duty, strict routine, and profound personal loneliness. Within the opulent walls of the Hofburg Palace, his daily existence was a meticulously choreographed dance, a testament to his dedication to the empire, yet also a poignant illustration of the isolation that came with ultimate power. No aspect of his life more clearly revealed this solitude than his daily meals, particularly his supper, which he almost invariably ate alone. Franz Josef was a creature of habit. His day began incredibly early, often before 5 a.m. regardless of the season or his health. He would rise, dress in his simple military uniform, and immediately attend to state papers. Breakfast was a Spartan affair. A cup of coffee and a roll consumed quickly while he worked. Lunch, too, was typically brief and functional. But supper, the final meal of the day, was where his profound isolation became most evident. The imperial dining halls in the Hofburg were vast and grand, designed to host hundreds of guests for glittering state banquets. The silver collection housed within the Hofburg boasts an unimaginable array of exquisite porcelain, silver, and crystal, all intended for such lavish displays. Yet for Franz Josef, these grand spaces were rarely used for intimate family dinners or casual gatherings. After the death of his beloved wife, Empress Elizabeth, and the tragic loss of his only son, Crown Prince Rudolf, his already reserved nature retreated further into himself. His supper was served in a small private dining room, adjacent to his study, or sometimes directly in his working chambers. The setting was stark in its simplicity for a monarch. A single table perhaps, set with a modest silver service, and a single candle awaited him. The food was brought in by liveried servants, meticulously prepared by the imperial chefs in the vast kitchens, taste-tested, and then delivered to his secluded space. The meal itself was not a gourmand. He preferred plain, traditional Austrian fare: boiled beef, simple vegetables, perhaps a light soup. Rich sauces or elaborate dishes were not to his liking. He ate quickly, efficiently, often finishing his meal in under 15 minutes. The servants would stand silently at attention, waiting to clear the dishes, but there was no conversation, no lingering over a glass of wine, no shared laughter. The silence in the room was often profound, punctuated only by the clinking of cutlery or the soft shuffle of a servant's foot. This solitary ritual was not just a preference. It was a reflection of his profound sense of duty and the personal tragedies that had hollowed out his private life. His marriage to Sisi, though initially affectionate, had become increasingly distant as she sought freedom and he immersed himself in governance. Her aversion to court life meant she was often absent from Vienna, traveling across Europe, leaving him to navigate the vast palace largely alone. The death of Rudolf at Merling, a suicide that Franz Josef publicly covered up, was a wound that never truly healed, extinguishing the hope for a direct heir and burdening him with immense grief. Sisi's assassination years later was the final devastating blow, severing his last emotional anchor. Thus his solitary supper became a symbol of his reign. A king deeply devoted to his realm, tirelessly working, but profoundly alone at its apex. He carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders, yet found little personal comfort or companionship in his private hours. His daughters and other family members would sometimes visit, but these interactions were often formal, steeped in the rigid etiquette he himself upheld. The warmth of a true family meal with lively conversation and shared experiences seemed to elude him. The Hofburg, filled with thousands of rooms and hundreds of people, could not fill the emotional void in the emperor's life. He was surrounded by opulence and power, yet remained cloistered, performing his duties with a stoic resolve that masked a deep inner sadness. His lonely supper was not merely a meal. It was a daily testament to the burdens of his crown, a quiet, almost melancholic ending to another day spent in service offered its rulers so little personal solace. The image of the aging emperor, sitting alone in a vast palace, silently consuming his plain meal, offers a rare, poignant glimpse into the deeply human cost of absolute power. Number 9. Empress Elizabeth's Secret Obsessions. Empress Elizabeth of Austria Sisi was a figure of immense public fascination, celebrated across Europe for her ethereal beauty and captivating allure. Yet, beneath the glittering facade of imperial glamour, Sisi harbored a series of deeply personal and intense obsessions, meticulously guarded secrets that shaped her daily life and reflected her profound anxieties and unconventional spirit. These were not mere hobbies. They were rituals, almost compulsions, that she pursued with an almost fanatical devotion within the Hofburg palace, and wherever her restless spirit took her. Her most dominant obsession was her beauty, specifically her figure and her famously long, thick hair. This was not simply vanity. It was a relentless pursuit of an ideal, a desperate attempt to control the only aspect of her life she felt she truly could. From her early 20s until her death, Sisi maintained an astonishingly strict regimen to keep her waist impossibly slender. She would measure her waist daily, and any slight increase in size would trigger extreme diets, often consisting of little more than raw milk, oranges, or beef juice. She abhorred food and frequently skipped meals, much to the concern of her staff and the emperor. This obsession with her figure was a constant battle against her natural metabolism. Coupled with her diet was an equally rigorous exercise routine, a radical concept for a 19th century empress. Within her private apartments at the Hofburg, particularly in her custom-built gymnasium, she would spend hours performing strenuous exercises. She lifted weights, climbed ropes, did gymnastic rings, and engaged in brisk walking. She would walk for miles, even in the palace gardens, or along the Ringstrasse, often at a pace that left her ladies-in-waiting breathless. This physical exertion was not just for her figure. It was a release for her nervous energy, a way to combat her recurring melancholic moods, and an escape from the stifling formality of court. These exercise sessions were kept as private as possible, a reflection of their unconventional nature. Her hair was another monumental obsession, reaching to her ankles. It was considered her crowning glory, a cascade of dark chestnut locks. The care of her hair was an elaborate, time-consuming ritual, consuming up to 3 hours every day. Her dedicated hairdresser, Fanny Angerer, and later others, was more than just a stylist. She was a confidant, a companion during these long, quiet hours. The process involved washing it with a mixture of eggs and cognac, drying it for hours, and then painstakingly braiding and arranging it. Sisi would often wear a white cloth around her shoulders to catch any fallen hairs, which she would then inspect to ensure she wasn't losing too much. This meticulous hair care was a daily performance, a testament to her perfectionism and her deep attachment to her most celebrated physical attribute. As she aged, Sisi developed an intense aversion to being photographed or painted. Her famous beauty, once celebrated, became a burden. She wanted to preserve the image of her youthful perfection, and refused to allow cameras to capture the inevitable signs of aging. She began to wear heavy veils, use large parasols, and carry fans, effectively shielding her face from public view and photographic lenses. This was a profound secret she guarded fiercely, ensuring that the world's memory of Empress Elizabeth remained perpetually youthful. Frozen in time, she was determined to control her image, even if it meant becoming a more elusive and mysterious figure in her later years. Beyond the physical, Sisi had a profound obsession with poetry and the spiritual world. She found solace in the verses of Heinrich Heine, whom she revered, and would spend hours reading and translating his works in her private library. She also wrote her own melancholic poems, expressing her feelings of confinement and her yearning for freedom. These writings were kept strictly secret, only shared with her closest confidants, and intended for destruction after her death. Her interest in spiritualism and seances, a popular pastime in the late 19th century, was also a closely guarded secret. She sought connection with the deceased, particularly her beloved cousin, King Ludwig II of Bavaria, and the spirit of Heinrich Heine, seeking answers and comfort beyond the material world. These activities, considered unconventional and even scandalous for a monarch, were performed in hushed tones within her private apartments. These secret obsessions provided Sisi with a sense of control and purpose in a life where so much was dictated by others. They were her escape routes, her personal acts of rebellion against the gilded cage of the Hofburg. While the world saw an empress of unparalleled beauty and distant grace, her private life was a whirlwind of rituals, anxieties, and a relentless pursuit of a personal ideal, a testament to the complex, deeply human struggles hidden beneath the imperial crown. Number 10. The unseen shadows of service. The Hofburg Palace, with its grandeur and endless sprawl, was a world of stark contrast. While the imperial family and their aristocratic guests lived lives of unimaginable luxury and public display, an enormous, largely unseen population toiled within its walls, forming the very backbone of its existence. These were the servants, the countless individuals whose lives were intertwined with the palace's daily rhythm, their tireless efforts ensuring that the magnificent illusion of imperial splendor never faltered. Their world was one of hidden passages, cramped quarters, and relentless work, a shadow realm essential to the functioning of the empire's heart. The sheer number of staff required to maintain a palace of the Hofburg size was staggering. It wasn't just a few dozen, but hundreds, potentially thousands of individuals, filling a vast hierarchy of roles, from the highest-ranking chamberlains and ladies-in-waiting to the lowliest scullery maids and stable boys. Each played a specific part in the complex ballet of imperial life. Their days began before dawn, long before the imperial family stirred from their silk-draped beds, and often ended late into the night after the last ball had concluded and the final candle snuffed out. The palace's architecture itself reflected this hidden world. Beneath the public ceremonial rooms and the elegant private apartments of the royals lay a labyrinthine network of service corridors, back staircases, and underground tunnels. These unseen pathways allowed servants to move swiftly and discreetly, carrying out their duties without disturbing the imperial family or their guests. Meals were transported from the vast kitchens through these hidden routes. Laundry moved from private chambers to the immense washing facilities, and supplies delivered to various parts of the palace, all without a visible disruption to the serene upper floors. The sound of their footsteps, the clinking of dishes, the murmur of their voices were confined to these unseen arteries of the palace. Life for many of these servants was one of immense physical labor and long hours. Kitchen staff worked in hot, noisy environments, preparing elaborate meals for hundreds. Scullery maids scrubbed endless piles of pots and pans. Laundry staff toiled over steaming tubs, washing, pressing, and folding vast quantities of linen. Footmen polished silver and brass until they gleamed, often hundreds of pieces for a single banquet. Chambermaids meticulously cleaned and maintained hundreds of rooms, dusting every surface, changing linens, and ensuring everything was in perfect order. Stable hands cared for hundreds of horses, mucking out stalls, grooming, and training. Despite their essential roles, the lives of these servants were often harsh, wages were modest, living conditions often cramped. Many slept in small, undecorated rooms, often in the attics or basements of the palace. Far from the grand spaces they cleaned and served, privacy was a luxury rarely afforded. Their lives were dictated by the rigid hierarchy of the court and the whims of their superiors. They were expected to be invisible, silent, and unfailingly efficient, their personal lives often sacrificed for the demands of their service. Yet, within this demanding environment, a unique community formed. Servants often developed close bonds with one another, sharing their triumphs, frustrations, and the occasional illicit gossip about their imperial employers. They formed their own social structures, their own friendships, and their own unspoken codes of conduct. They were the true witnesses to the everyday lives of the royals, privy to their quirks, their moods, and their unguarded moments, details that would never make it into official histories. Their world, though hidden, was rich with its own stories, its own dramas, and its own quiet acts of loyalty and rebellion. Occasionally, a servant might rise through the ranks, gaining the trust and favor of an imperial family member. For example, Fanny Angerer, Empress Elizabeth's hairdresser, became one of Sisi's closest confidants, privy to her deepest secrets and innermost thoughts. These personal relationships, though rare, offered a glimpse into the human connection that could form across the rigid class divides of the court, demonstrating that even within the most formal of institutions, personal bonds could flourish. The unseen shadows of service at the Hofburg were not just about labor. They were about the human engine that drove the empire's heart. Their quiet footsteps, their tireless hands, and their unspoken stories were as integral to the palace's existence as the grand state occasions and the decisions of emperors. They represented the hidden cost of imperial splendor, a testament to thousands of unsung individuals who dedicated their lives to maintaining the magnificent, glittering illusion that was the Habsburg court. Their presence, largely invisible to the outside world, was a constant vital pulse. Beneath the majestic surface of the Hofburg,